Sometimes I ask myself, why must women face losing their jobs because of discrimination in their own workplace? I personally have too many stories of inequality, especially in the restaurant industry, but just in general, women in the workplace really do deal with a lot of sexual harassment, verbal harassment, and a lot of us do have these stories. And women feel like they would rather leave quietly most of the time than go to a manager or go to higher ups or deal with the situation in general. In fact, 90% of women in restaurants face sexual harassment, according to Valletta 2020, the author of a blog entitled What to Become. A year ago, I was working in a ski valley in New Mexico and faced discrimination not from my coworkers, not from my managers or higher ups, but from the customers who are always right. Now, usually I expect insensitive customers, or not necessarily insensitive customers, but insensitive comments coming from customers. And in this instance, it was from a regular who I would assume lived down in the town, came up all the time. He was just there all the time. All of my coworkers knew his face, we knew his name, and we knew what would happen when he came in and fight over who had to deal with him. So one day this man ended up coming back with a bunch of his friends. They clearly were all drunk beforehand, coming in, kind of being loud, starting a little thing, and me and my coworkers were like, all right, let's see who gets to deal with this table, and luckily enough, it happened to be me. So the comments started off innocent enough, not necessarily anything overtly sexual or very, very bad, but just comments like, oh, about my looks, or about the fact that I'm serving them and the gender roles, women, men, and all of that. Eventually the comments did start to build up, and I started to realize that I might have to say something, because a lot of the times, especially as servers, I'm not sure about a lot of other jobs, but especially as a server, they know that you can't say anything back. They know that you just have to kind of just stand there and laugh, or just kind of like ignore a little bit. They know that what they're saying to you can't really reciprocate, so they kind of trap you in that way. I eventually decided that I would go tell my manager. At the time, he really didn't handle it very well. He's a nice guy, but he didn't really know how to deal with the situation in the best way possible. When I asked if I could not take the table any longer, he told me that to just continue through with it and we'll talk about it when they leave. But this has been something that people have been bringing to his attention for a while, so it did kind of bother me at the time. I realized eventually that it was time to stand up for myself. A lot of the times this has happened and I've just kind of ignored it, but I realized in this moment this was somebody who was going to be coming back next week. He was a regular. It wasn't a one-time customer who was going to be leaving, going back to another country the day after. It was somebody who was going to be around a lot. So I realized that I had to say something. Went back to the table, and one of his friends started giving me backhanded apologies, like, oh, I'm so sorry for my friend, he just thinks you're really pretty. Comments like that, where it's not extremely over the top, but definitely to the point where it's very uncomfortable. I eventually did speak up about it to the group at the table. I said, okay guys, I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable here today, so I think what I'm going to do is transfer your table to somebody else, and I'm just going to excuse myself from the situation today. They tried to, be like, no, we're sorry, we're just joking around, it's just a joke. And I was like, no, I think I'm good for today. I think I'm gonna move on and give my table to somebody else. And eventually I walked away. I was nervous I was going to get fired, but the aftermath of the situation actually went pretty well. I surprisingly got a lot of support from the higher ups and my manager after that. The guys were told that if they had another complaint, they weren't allowed back in the restaurant, and I think overall things went pretty well. I realized how common this instance is, not only for men and women, but just in general in the workplace for people, this dealing with customers who know you can't respond because it's your job. That's how they get you. And as women in the workplace, especially, we put up with a lot of stuff where sexual, physical harassment, verbal, just mentally in general is very draining and can make a lot of people feel uncomfortable in the place that they work. Roughly 58% of women who have been harassed as employees don't file any sort of complaint or let anybody know this is going on, simply to just deal with the problem, get their tips, move on, not get fired, don't have to deal with repercussions that could possibly occur from the higher ups in their job. And I think a really good thing to say is, next time we go to restaurants or we're in a workplace or anything, we're going to shop, think about how you speak to people, because sometimes people are not necessarily sure or confident in the way they talk to somebody, and we could be the cause of inequality in that place ourselves.